faithfully sharing value and exploring great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally talking books. Today, I'll interpret this book for you, the lengthy memoir My Past and Thoughts by the 19th century Russian writer Herzen. When it comes to 19th century Russian literature, you might think of Tolstoy and War and Peace, or Dostoevsky and Crime and Punishment, and you'd recall Pushkin, Turgenev, and others. But there's another cultural giant we must mention, and that is Alexander Herzen. His representative work is the memoir My Past and Thoughts, which we're covering today. In this massive tome of over 1 million words, he explores nearly all the issues faced by Russian intellectuals. It's spread widely across Europe and the world. Alexander Herzen was born in 1812 in Moscow to a noble family. Herzen's family had served as bureaucrats for the Tsar for generations. But Herzen was determined from youth to overthrow Tsarist autocracy, liberate the oppressed masses, and achieve social equality. He first spread radical ideas at home. After 1847, he traveled Europe, publishing newspapers and books, connecting with thinkers and activists, and sheltering political exiles. I witnessed the rise and fall of European revolutions and endured the pain of family breakdown and loved ones' early deaths. But throughout his life, he tirelessly pursued the grand vision of a new Russia until his death in 1870. And though Herzen never achieved his dream, the memoir My Past and Thoughts, he started in the 1850s, earned him global renown. This memoir is beautifully written and deeply insightful. Herzen chronicled Russia's early 19th century history, honored noble souls, and candidly examined his inner changes, repenting for mistakes. So it's a true spiritual history, often compared to Rousseau's Confessions, and hailed as one of history's greatest memoirs. 1812, when Herzen was born, was a pivotal year in Russian history, because in June that year, the Russo-French War erupted. Napoleon's forces occupied Moscow and set a fire that razed the city. Luckily, before the flames spread, Herzen's father rescued the whole family from Moscow. The opening of My Past and Thoughts describes the nanny telling young Herzen about Napoleon's soldiers' arrogance, Russians' resistance, and Moscow burning. How the infant Herzen was swaddled by his mother and carried to a carriage fleeing the city. Hearing these stories, Herzen felt destined for greatness in such extraordinary times. Herzen deeply appreciated the servants' companionship and formed strong bonds with them. He said, "When they played with me, they laughed wholeheartedly, giving me pure joy, while distinguished guests just absent-mindedly humored me like any child." Thus, Herzen gradually developed a preference for equality. He believed true equality was essential for normal, joyful human interactions. This made him view his father as an antagonist, who always maintained aristocratic airs. Like having servants warm his newspaper in winter to protect his precious fingers. Father also belittled mother, bossing her around and sometimes hitting her. He'd flaunt authority, scolding when seeing Herzen play with servants. "Mingling with inferiors disgraces our family." Herzen often saw his father punish servants by summoning police to conscript them. In those days, Russian military service lasted over 25 years, a life sentence. Their lives ruined, Herzen could only join other servants donating money and scarves. One nanny would scold him crossly when he misbehaved. She'd say, "Just wait, you'll grow up to be like other masters." This wounded Herzen deeply, making him vow never to become an oppressive master. Herzen wasn't alone. Young nobles secretly plotted social reform. These nobles were older than Herzen. Most were educated officers in their 20s, filled with patriotic fervor. In 1812, during Napoleon's invasion, they witnessed that it was actually the serfs, not the officers, who fought bloodily and defeated Napoleon. These young nobles were shocked and began believing serfs were the true patriots. Only by liberating serfs and achieving social equality could Russia progress. These nobles gathered to exchange ideas, formed secret societies, and petitioned the Tsar to abolish serfdom. But they gradually realized change was impossible while the Tsar ruled. When Tsar Alexander I died suddenly on November 9th, 1825, they seized the new Tsar's accession to launch an uprising, capture Petersburg, overthrow the government, and establish constitutional democracy. But they miscalculated. The uprising was easily crushed, and all progressive nobles were arrested. Since it happened in December, these rebels were called Decembrists and faced harsh interrogations. 5 leaders were hanged, over 120 others were exiled, over 300 rebel officers were released. But the new czar was crueler and more vindictive. After suppression, only the rebels' wives dared weep and protest publicly. At 13, this event deeply shocked Herzen and decisively shaped his life. The gallows corpses enraged him. He wrote, "This is my spiritual awakening, a new world unfolded," cementing his lifelong stance. Side with the weak, oppose the strong. At Moscow University, Herzen studied while waging revolution. With passionate youths, he organized societies, published papers and pamphlets, and gave speeches. They armed their cause with German philosophy and French utopian socialism. But the Tsar tightened ideological control, terrorizing progressives. Even Moscow University students were blacklisted. Herzen's classmate, Vadim, blacklisted after graduation, couldn't find work. His record barred him everywhere. Later, Vadim died in poverty and illness. Herzen was present at his deathbed. He recalled, "This was my first time witnessing a close friend's death. I saw death's indelible horror, its senseless randomness, its blind indifference to morality or justice." In 1830, a major uprising erupted in Russian-occupied Poland. Herzen was excited, but the uprising was brutally crushed. Rebels were shackled, paraded through Moscow under citizens' silent gaze, then marched toward Siberia. At such times, Herzen imagined himself among them, confronting the Tsar in debate before being exiled. He wrote, "We must rage, must endure trials relentlessly, must see the beast's claws from its heartless chest." He believed an equal, democratic, progressive young Russia would be born in his generation. But when free, one can easily preach anger and glorify sacrifice. Yet they may be unprepared for real tests, Herzen included. One July night in 1834, officers, including a police chief, visited Herzen's home, rummaging through his books, letters, and clothes. Then ordered him to the station. The abruptness created heavy silence. Father's voice trembled. Mother wept softly, nearly fainting. Panicked servants stood mute nearby. Herzen fought tears, tugged the chief's sleeve, saying, "Let's go." At his words, servants rushed to kiss his hands, while father brought a small icon. Grandfather's dying gift. Herzen knelt as father placed the icon around his neck, then embraced and blessed him. In that moment, the distance between father and son vanished. Herzen's arrest charge was vague: reading banned books and ties to underground groups. Adjacent to his cell was an interrogation room. He heard whips, kicks, punches, women's shrieks, police shouts, officials droning documents mixed with interrogators threatening new arrivals. You're going to Siberia! As a noble political prisoner, Herzen got way better treatment than regular folks. Thanks to his father's connections, Herzen landed a decent exile spot, sent to Perm near the Asian border. Once he arrived, he was introduced to the governor and got some preferential care. As someone committed to revolution, Herzen kept a close eye on the fate of ordinary people during this time. And, he cared about other exiles' plights and became close friends with a Pole arrested after the uprising. But soon after, Herzen got orders to move to another exile site. They carefully parted ways, exchanging gifts. The Pole took out a treasured small chain and broke off a few links for Herzen. Herzen tore a cufflink from his shirt and gave it to him. On the journey to the new exile place, um, Herzen also witnessed a touching scene. Along roads where exiles passed, peasants left milk, bread, and drinks outside their windows, meant for those secretly fleeing Siberia. They could grab it whenever hungry or thirsty. Herzen said locals called them the unfortunate instead of exiles, showing how unpopular the Tsar was. True morality lies in people's hearts. At the new exile location, Herzen was assigned clerical work in a government office. He kept befriending those oppressed by Tsarist tyranny. After 2.5 years, his exile period finally ended. Herzen returned home, temporarily settling in a small town near Moscow. And then experienced the best year of his life. In 1838, he married his cousin Natalia, Herzen's sweetest memory. His account brims with tenderness. Natalia was an orphan adopted by Herzen's aunt. Like Herzen, she had deep empathy for common people. Herzen understood Natalia's kindness and loneliness. They commiserated and corresponded for years. But Herzen never faced their relationship head on until just before exile, when he realized he'd always had special feelings, already living in love, but was too wrapped up in revolutionary passion in their letters to notice. At this point, Natalia had already received the dowry promised by her foster mother, a whopping 100,000 rubles. But her foster mother forbade Natalia from marrying the exiled Herzen, instead arranging her for a colonel, and Natalia's relatives pressured her heavily. In this situation, Herzen vowed to marry Natalia and take control of his own marriage. He believed this was also a battle against Russia's old system and culture. Herzen decided to elope with Natalia. With the help of friends and family, Herzen secretly traveled from Vladimir to Moscow. Then they met in a cemetery outside the city, and with friends as witnesses, pledged to be together forever. But Natalia's dowry was gone. Relying on his father's support, Herzen and Natalia weathered the toughest times, and Herzen finally achieved a happy marriage. The next year, their first child was born. Herzen was immersed in the nervousness and excitement of first-time fatherhood, and his heart subtly changed. Before, he was passionate with ambitions to change the world, but now he was immersed in the contentment brought by love. He wrote, "My hopes have ceased. I am satisfied. I live in the present. Yes, I expect nothing from tomorrow. I am carefree, trust tomorrow, and I won't lose anything." Natalia brought quietness, kindness, and beauty to his life. He lived in a secluded small town, quietly reading and thinking, not wasting a single moment. Herzen admitted that his grand ideals, the revolutionary cause he once vowed to pursue, were temporarily set aside. However, the happy times were short-lived. From the 1840s to the 1860s, huge changes occurred in Herzen's life. He sadly wrote, "My heart is sorrowful and fearful. I foresee that simple yet profound inner life will never return." In summary, Herzen encountered two tragedies: the shattering of his revolutionary ideals and the cracks in his family. The latter half of Herzen's life was overshadowed by these tragedies. After marriage, Herzen's heart still resonated with songs of battle. He continued to publish articles actively, striving to promote radical social change. However, at his alma mater, Moscow University, he found that many in the anti-Tsarist group he once organized had turned to studying Hegel, which was actually a compromise. Because young people felt the system couldn't be changed, resistance seemed pointless. Better to follow European intellectual trends. Meanwhile, they should solidify their knowledge foundation. Simultaneously, government control tightened. In 1840, Herzen criticized police in a letter to a friend, intercepted by censors, resulting in another exile sentence, this time exiled to Novgorod in northwest Russia. He returned to Moscow only after 2 years. During this exile, Natalia's newborn daughter died tragically, and their son became chronically ill. Natalia sank into severe depression, her health deteriorating. After returning from exile, Herzen re-examined his revolutionary idealism. He realized his past activism, dangerous ideas, and serious reflections were now impossible to implement. Gradually, he considered going abroad, partly due to domestic failures, hoping external forces could advance Russian reform. He also keenly sensed Europe's old order had persisted too long. From Russia to Italy, France, Germany, Britain, public discontent fermented everywhere. A storm was brewing, the edifice crumbling. He felt compelled to achieve greatness in this pivotal era, never imagining he'd never return to his homeland. In 1847, Herzen's father died, leaving a huge inheritance. Resolved to emigrate, he took his wife, mother, 3 children, 2 friends, and servants, a large entourage, to Paris. Herzen particularly yearned for Paris. It was the revolutionary capital where dissidents worldwide sought refuge. There, Herzen quickly met various exiles criticizing France as fiercely as he had Russia. He said Paris had a vast bourgeoisie too content to revolt, unlike Russia, which lacked such obstacles. Thus, he grew more hopeful for Russia's revolutionary prospects. When the Tsarist government noticed his statements, they demanded his return. He refused, so the Tsar confiscated all his domestic assets. Then European banker Rothschild, admiring Herzen and seeking to expand his financial empire, supported Herzen's fight against the Tsar. After some complications, Herzen recovered most of his personal assets and acquired Swiss citizenship. Until his death in 1870, he never experienced poverty and funded other exiles and revolutionary causes. In 1848, Paris' February Revolution forced King Louis Philippe to abdicate. The bourgeoisie took power, ending monarchy and establishing France's Second Republic. Herzen rushed back from Italy upon hearing the news, hoping to see, a post-revolution utopia, but found the new bourgeois ruler still oppressing people. Meanwhile, Napoleon's nephew Louis Bonaparte became president and planned to establish a dictatorship in 1848. In June, Parisian proletarians launched the June Uprising, which was bloodily suppressed. Over the next year, Louis Bonaparte gradually consolidated power and strengthened autocratic rule. Publications run by Herzen and other revolutionaries were forced to suspend operations. In July 1849, cholera broke out in Paris. Many of Herzen's acquaintances died from the disease, forcing him to leave Paris. After these heavy blows in Paris, Herzen engaged in deep reflection again. He saw Parisians passionately overthrow one emperor only to welcome another dictator. He began doubting whether his previous anti-autocracy sentiments were too idealistic. The skepticism extended to the revolutionary exile community itself. He went to Switzerland, where masses of exiles from failed revolutions gathered. French, Germans, Poles, Italians, and others. He felt most were fame seekers posing as persecuted elites, publishing papers, debating, endlessly discussing Europe's future. But Herzen questioned, could these people truly lead the masses? Did ordinary people need these eloquent, erudite, intellectual leaders? They only engaged in empty talk without practical skills. That all kinds of failed cultural figures joined them. Unappreciated artists, ill-timed writers, college dropouts, caseless lawyers, talentless actors, and various lofty but incompetent so-called idealists. Herzen described true revolutionaries like Orsini, who organized Italian uprisings and attempted to assassinate a French dictator, like Louis Bonaparte or Leveron, who fought in the June uprising and later resistant French forces in Rome. A true international warrior. He said only those who act on conviction and sacrifice deserve praise. He wrote, they care not for status, profit, or security. Their entire lives and efforts are devoted to selfless causes, some forgetting wealth, others poverty, driven relentlessly by truth, science, art, and humanity. No personal interest outweighs these. For mere talkers, Herzen showed nothing but contempt. For instance, he described an exile named Struve. Struve was a typical windbag who flaunted obscure knowledge to show off. Once Struve ranted about vegetarianism. It purifies the body, offers many benefits. Vegetarians' corpses don't even smell after death. Herzen retorted sarcastically, "Why should I care? I won't be sniffing my own corpse." This became the wittiest line in all of my past and thoughts. Sadly, Herzen soon lost such humor, plunging into true tragedy. Herzen and Natalia's marriage had been happy, but after the June uprising's failure, his spirit drowned in bitterness. In Paris, she listened to gunfire, saw ruined homes, refugees sleeping bloody streets, her soul trembling with the city's agony. She opened their home to shelter exiled victims. Natalia was equally sensitive. She saw corpse-filled carts, bound captives, and a deaf-mute child shot for not hearing police shouts. Each scene shattered her anew. Yet these two compassionate souls barely communicated. Herzen obsessed over politics, neglecting depressed Natalia, even ignoring her illnesses. This created an opening for George Herweg, a German poet and radical revolutionary. He fled Germany to Paris in 1848. Though married himself, he often visited the Herzens. Preoccupied with politics and constant travels, Herzen often neglected listening to his wife. Thus, Herweg became Natalia's confidant. Moreover, in early 1849, Herweg faced financial hardship. The poet's melancholy attracted Natalia. She frankly told Herzen, "You're an adult, but Herweg's different. He's a big child. Trivial matters throw him between ecstasy and despair." Over these 2 years, they moved frequently. First to Zurich, Switzerland, then to Nice, with Herweg always following. In late 1849, Herzen returned to Paris, temporarily separating from Natalia. During the separation, Herweg and Natalia's relationship intensified. Herzen had long noticed this. While corresponding with his wife, he knew he and Herweg had become rivals. Natalia wavered between love and guilt, growing increasingly distraught. By late 1850, their marriage was in deep crisis. On New Year's Eve, Natalia ordered a painting to give to Herweg. Herzen said, "I want one like it too." Natalia replied, "Then take this one." Herzen coldly refused, and they fell silent. After New Year's 1851, the Herzens finally confronted each other. Herzen petulantly declared he would step aside, causing Natalia to nearly faint. Fortunately, Herzen compromised. They calmed down and agreed to fund the Herweg's relocation to Genoa. This should have ended it, but Herweg privately claimed Natalia promised him, "Once Herzen calms down, she'll join me." When this reached Herzen in Geneva, he was furious. Previously, even with marital issues, she hadn't deceived him. But now, she'd pledged herself to another. Unbearable! He collapsed on his bed, muttering, "My life is ruined." Blinded by rage, he wrote Natalia a scathing letter. Natalia replied swiftly, "I've hit rock bottom. Nothing I say will convince you now. I just want to die." Reading the blood and tear-stained letter, Herzen woke as from a dream. Realizing Herweg had lied, he was overcome with remorse. He quickly wrote to clarify, dispelling misunderstandings. The couple finally reconciled. Natalia came specially to see him. They spent days together like newly dating lovers, and for months afterward, Herzen remained in good spirits. However, on November 15th, 1851, another blow struck. That day, Herzen's mother took his grandson and young son on a sea excursion. Tragically, they encountered a shipwreck. Both perished without a trace. Natalia's health was already fragile, barely recovered from the affair's torment. This sudden catastrophe shattered her completely. In early 1852, Natalia fell gravely ill with dacryocystitis. Months later, she passed away. It was May 2nd, 1852, barely 2 weeks before their 14th anniversary. After burying her, the house stood desolate. Herzen's mind went blank. He left Nice for London, but couldn't move on for ages. With haunted recollection, he returned to their French home. Dust blanketed the sofa, The bedroom untouched. The mattress lay dismantled on the floor, as if the funeral just ended. Herzen sighed. Poor sufferer, though I loved her deeply, I bear responsibility for her death. Writing this section, Herzen revealed his most piercing self-reflection. He didn't rant against Herweg, merely noting, lightly, Herweg still owed me 10,000 francs when he left. Later, he defaulted on the debt. But Herzen constantly pondered, why did this happen? Where was I to blame? He insisted he was responsible for his wife's death. He said, I was consumed by frustration over thwarted ambitions. I neglected my wife, and I hurt her through both gullibility and suspicion. I'll never forgive myself. In autumn 1852, Herzen went to London. His friend asked, are you just letting that man go? He didn't answer, wishing only to turn the page with silence. Perhaps we understand his choice thus. The deeper one dissects oneself, the more vividly the past endures. The more he yearned to move beyond the past and rebuild his life. British philosopher Isaiah Berlin said Herzen achieved something almost unprecedented, meticulously documenting how rage, jealousy, and madness tormented him, and how he emerged scarred but whole, faithfully sharing value and exploring great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally talking books. Today, I'll interpret this book for you. The lengthy memoir, My Past and Thoughts, by the 19th century Russian writer Herzen. When it comes to 19th century Russian literature, you might think of Tolstoy and War and Peace, or Dostoevsky and Crime and Punishment, and you'd recall Pushkin, Turgenev, and others. But there's another cultural giant we must mention, Alexander Herzen. His representative work is the memoir My Past and Thoughts, which we're covering today. In this massive tome of over 1 million words, he explores nearly all issues faced by Russian intellectuals. It spread widely across Europe and the world. Alexander Herzen was born in 1812 in Moscow to a noble family. Herzen's family had served as bureaucrats for the Tsar for generations. Yet from childhood, Herzen resolved to overthrow Tsarist autocracy, liberate the oppressed masses, and achieve social equality. He first spread radical ideas domestically. After 1847, he traveled Europe publishing newspapers and books, connecting with thinkers and activists and sheltering political exiles. He witnessed European revolutions rise and fall, and endured family breakdown and loved ones' premature deaths. But throughout his life, he tirelessly pursued the grand vision of a new Russia until his 1870 death. Though Herzen never achieved his dream, the memoir My Past and Thoughts, he began in the 1850s, earned him global renown. This memoir features exquisite prose and profound insights, chronicling Russia's early 19th century history, honoring noble souls while candidly examining his inner evolution and repenting mistakes. Thus, it's a true spiritual history, often compared to Rousseau's Confessions and hailed among history's greatest memoirs. Herzen was born in 1812, a crucial year in Russian history, because in June that year, the Russo-French War broke out. Napoleon's forces occupied Moscow and lit a fire that destroyed the whole city. Luckily, before the flames spread, Herzen's father rescued the whole family from Moscow. The opening of My Past and Thoughts has the nanny telling young Herzen about Napoleon's soldiers' arrogance, Russians' resistance, and Moscow burning. How the infant Herzen was bundled in swaddling clothes by his mom and carried onto a carriage to escape the city. Every time he heard these stories, Herzen felt destined for greatness in such a special era. Herzen deeply appreciated the nanny and servants' company, forming strong bonds with them. He said, when they played with me, they laughed their hearts out, giving me pure joy. Distinguished guests just absentmindedly humored me like any kid. So Herzen slowly developed a preference for equality. He believed only true equality makes human interactions normal and pleasant. That's why Herzen saw his father as a villain, because he always acted superior with aristocratic airs. Like on winter mornings, he'd have servants warm his newspaper by fire to protect his precious fingers. Father also disrespected mother, bossing her around and sometimes hitting and yelling. He loved flaunting authority. If he saw me playing with servants, he'd scold, "Mingling with inferiors disgraces our family." Herzen witnessed father punishing servants many times. He never beat them but called police to conscript them. Back then, Russian military service lasted over 25 years. Punished servants had no choice. Their lives ruined, Herzen could only join other servants donating money and a scarf to the poor soul. Um, One nanny would scold him crossly when he got too mischievous. She'd say, "Just wait, you'll grow up to be like other masters." This wounded Herzen deeply, making him vow never to become an oppressive master. Herzen wasn't alone. Young nobles secretly plotted social reform. These nobles were older than Herzen. Most were educated officers in their 20s, filled with patriotic fervor. In 1812, during Napoleon's invasion, they witnessed that it was actually the serfs, not the officers, who fought bloodily and defeated Napoleon. These young nobles were shocked and began believing serfs were the true patriots. Only by liberating serfs and achieving social equality could Russia progress. These nobles gathered to exchange ideas, form secret societies, and petitioned the Tsar to abolish serfdom. But they gradually realized change was impossible while the Tsar ruled. When Tsar Alexander I died suddenly on November 9th, 1825, they seized the new Tsar's accession to launch an uprising, capture Petersburg, overthrow the government, and establish constitutional democracy. That they miscalculated. The uprising was easily crushed, and all progressive nobles were arrested. Since it happened in December, these rebels were called Decembrists and faced harsh interrogations. 5 leaders were hanged, over 120 others were exiled. Over 300 rebel officers were released. But the new Tsar was crueler and more vindictive. After suppression, only the rebels' wives dared weep and protest publicly. At 13, this event deeply shocked Herzen and decisively shaped his life. The gallows corpses enraged him. He wrote, "This was my spiritual awakening. A new world unfolded, cementing his lifelong stance, side with the weak, oppose the strong." At Moscow University, Herzen studied while waging revolution. With passionate youths, he organized societies, published papers and pamphlets, and gave speeches. Thus, Herzen assisted various exiles but kept his distance, never forming factions. He respected Europe's celebrated revolutionaries, but never with fanaticism. During his exile, financier Rothschild helped him preserve his family assets. Having settled in Europe, Herzen now lamented, "I left Russia for revolution. Yet now I deal with financiers and notaries. I buy houses, frequent stock markets. I've become a Western rentier living off unearned income. Thus, my past and thoughts is profoundly a personal, spiritual, and confessional history." We see Herzen's life rise and fall with his nation's destiny, at times brimming with confidence, at others utterly disheartened. He dissected his own contradictions, unable to forgive, hurting loved ones, or enjoying comfort while failing to alleviate public suffering. He yearned to refine himself through every experience. Precisely why, after partial 1854 publication, translation swiftly sparked a Europe-wide reading frenzy. Herzen chronicled Europe's pivotal 19th century political events, seamlessly weaving personal narrative with historical backdrop. Critics deem this integration key to surpassing Rousseau's Confessions. From 1812's patriotic war to Decembrist uprising, 1840s intellectual life, 1848 revolutions, and 1850s London exile, spanning half a century and continents, it portrays hundreds of intellectuals, celebrities, and revolutionaries, thus hailed as a 19th century encyclopedia of European intellectuals. As Russia's intellectual exemplar, Herzen candidly revisits revolution, exile, paternal bonds, and marital fractures. He invites us to share his journey, triumphs and sorrows, moving us centuries later with his personal struggle. Through this book alone, blending imagination, insight, virtue, and intellect, Herzen stands as Russia's great soul gifted to the world. And all right, this concludes our interpretation of my past and thoughts. Reading notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.